when it comes to these 40 years and what generation, but they're still predicting that there has to be a generation that will not die. And it'll be roughly that 40-year generation. Any questions so far? Now, we have determined that there is a generation that will not die, and that you cannot predict the exact time of Jesus' return, but you can predict the seasons. So there are what is called general signs of Jesus' coming and specific signs. Let's just look at a few general ones real quick. Turn to Matthew 24, verse 3. Matthew 24, verse 3. Now just before that, verse 1. Jesus left the temple and was going away, and his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. And he answered them, you see all of these, don't you? Truly I say to you that there will not be one stone here left upon another that will not be thrown down. This is a classic case of putting words into Jesus' mouth as a prediction. So if Jesus lived around the year 30 CE and said these words, he would have been predicting future that the temple would be destroyed. The problem is that these words were written in 85 CE. What's that, about 50 some years later? And they're looking back in history at an event that took place in 70 CE when the Emperor Titus came to Jerusalem and literally leveled the temple, leveled the wall, leveled the city. This is a classic case of taking an historical event that took place, projecting it back into Jesus' mouth, although the person who is writing it is writing about it 15 years later. So it really is a classic case where you're trying to make a predictive statement out of something that is really simply a statement of historical fact that already took place 15 years ago. Verse 3, and he sat on the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him and said, tell us what will be the sign of your coming and the close of the age. The Mount Olivet Discourse takes place in Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13. And it's basically a regurgitation of this discourse. This is his prophetic discourse in the three Gospels. And so it talks about what is the sign of the coming of the age, the sign of your coming. And then Jesus says following, take heed that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of this is but the beginning of the birth pangs. Verse 9, they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated amongst all nations. Verse 14, we want to mark this one down. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. And then in verse 15 and following, you'll see him talk about in verse 20 what is called the Great Tribulation. So what you have in this predictive scheme is you have a whole bunch of general type of signs that are going to tell you that the end of the world is near, but it's not the end. There will be a tribulation, but then there will be a great tribulation that I'll describe to you in just a few minutes. So these are the general signs. Let's look at them. Wars and rumors of wars. Where's the headline here? This was several years ago. I had read somewhere, so this has to be maybe a couple, even decades ago when I was reading once, that somebody had done a study of recorded history for about 5,000 years or whatever, and found that during that whole time, there are only about 38 years of peace. So when you talk about wars and rumors of war, you can't really miss on this one. I mean, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars all the time.
There were
Not just
38
wars,
years.
but rumors of wars. Okay?
Peace everywhere?
Yeah, apparently. I don't know how he calculated or where he calculated, but there was somewhere that he managed to find 38 years, nobody fought.
Wow.
Go figure.
Is that back to back or a total of 38 years, like 5 years, 5 years?
Yeah, that's just scattered years here and there and
Okay.
everywhere. As far as
I
he could
can't
tell
believe
from
there was
ancient
a
texts or
1 year
whatever he was
war.
looking at, and how he ever figured it out, I don't know. But I think the point is really that there's been wars and rumors of war all the time. And then we have, of course, earthquakes! Haiti! Oh no! Jesus coming back! You know what I mean? Well, how often do we have these? Now, here's their argument. Their argument is that in the end times, or as the end times get closer, these things will increase. They'll get worse. They'll be more often. They'll be more intense. So the thing in Haiti just kind of revs them up. But these are general signs. Let's look at another little quickie here. Turn to 1 Timothy 4. 1 Timothy 4. Kind of toward the back there, as you get through some of Paul's letters here. 1 Timothy 4, verse 1. Now the Spirit expressly says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith by giving heed to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons, through the pretenses of liars whose consciences are seared, who forbid marriage and enjoin abstinence from food which God created to be received with thanksgiving. For everything created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected. This is another general type of sign. In other words, there'll be a falling away from the faith. Be a bunch of atheists that'll show up, and they'll start falling away from the faith. And you'll have ministers who used to be ministers who are now atheists.
We don't forbid
I didn't realize that my change was a sign of Jesus' coming. But anyway, that's kind of what they predict here, is that and by the way, there was this Pew study, do you remember, which said evangelicals at a rate of about 56% believe that you could get to heaven other than through Jesus. And the Jack Nancy's and some of these fundamentalists are just livid that the evangelicals don't believe that the only way to get to heaven is Jesus. That's a sign of this falling away. That somehow, and then of course it's always been their contention that the liberal churches are not real Christian churches, that they don't really live up to the true scriptural standards, that they've strayed from, and they're a part of this falling away. Another little quickie, let's turn to 2 Timothy chapter 3. This is a good 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. But understand this, that in the last days. So you're following this. Remember there's this last days term, or the latter days, or the end times. We're talking about the time that Jesus is coming back or about to come back. Understand in the last days there will come times of stress. Now, folks, stress is a sign of the second coming. For men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents. Okay, all you kids, you need to be obedient to your parents, and if you're not, then, that's a sign. You tell that to your kids now, that they need to obey their parents. Disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, inhuman, implacable, slanderers, profligates, fierce, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to the form of religion but denying the power of it. Boy, how many sermons have been preached on that little verse? That right there is one that they really hang on. Avoid such people. So these are called general signs. They don't say that Jesus is coming back right away, but they're saying get ready. It's part of yes, it is happening. This is the end times. We're living in the end times. We are this generation. These are the general signs. Now, there are specific signs. Remember, we read one which said that this gospel shall be preached to all nations. If you remember the Great Commission,